Princess Vailora stood before the tall mirror in her chamber and looked at herself one last time. The white ceremonial dress of her people flowed down to the floor like liquid silver. In a few hours, she would marry a human, a species that most of the galaxy considered primitive and weak. She had accepted this duty without question. The Zethrani Empire needed allies, and the humans had something valuable. They controlled a strategic section of space near the outer reaches, a region rich in rare minerals. A marriage alliance would secure access to those resources without the cost of war. Her father, Emperor Matharan, had explained it simply. The humans were desperate to be accepted by the galactic community. They would agree to almost anything, and Vailora, as the third daughter, was expendable enough to be sent away but valuable enough to make the gesture meaningful. She did not feel insulted by this. She understood politics. She had been trained for moments like this since childhood. The wedding took place on Harmony Prime, a neutral station that floated in the space between empires. Representatives from 17 different species filled the Great Hall, their strange bodies and stranger customs creating a sea of color and noise. Vailora walked down the central aisle with her head held high, ignoring the whispers that followed her. At the altar stood her future husband. His name was Daniel Cole, and he was the most ordinary-looking creature she had ever seen. He was tall for a human, with dark hair that was starting to turn gray at the edges. His eyes were a simple brown color, warm and calm. He wore a plain black suit that looked almost cheap compared to the elaborate costumes around him. When she reached him, he smiled at her. It was a genuine smile, not the practiced expression of a diplomat. For a moment, Vailora did not know how to respond. The ceremony was brief. The Galactic Council had designed a ritual that offended no one, which meant it satisfied no one either. Words were spoken. Documents were signed. And just like that, Vailora was married to an alien from a backwater planet called Earth. The reception afterward was where the real business happened. Ambassadors and trade ministers circled like predators, each one trying to gain advantage from this new arrangement. Vailora played her part perfectly, smiling and making empty promises while revealing nothing of importance. She noticed that Daniel stayed mostly quiet. He stood beside her when required, shook hands when introduced, and answered questions with simple politeness. But he never tried to impress anyone. He never boasted about Earth or made grand claims about human potential. The Karathi ambassador, a massive creature covered in bone-like plates, approached them near the end of the evening. His name was Drexon, and he commanded one of the largest fleets in the galaxy. "So this is the human," Drexon said, looking down at Daniel with obvious contempt. "I expected something more impressive." "I apologize for disappointing you," Daniel replied calmly. Drexon laughed, a harsh sound like rocks grinding together. "Your species has existed for what? A few thousand years? My people were building warships when your ancestors were still living in caves. Do not think this marriage changes anything. Humans are insects. You will be absorbed or destroyed within a century." Vailora tensed, ready to intervene. Such open insults were technically forbidden at diplomatic events, but Daniel simply nodded as if Drexon had commented on the weather. "Perhaps you are right," Daniel said. "Time will tell." Drexon snorted and walked away, clearly unsatisfied by the lack of reaction. Vailora turned to her new husband with confusion in her eyes. "You did not defend yourself," she said. "There was nothing to defend," Daniel replied. He stated his opinion. "I acknowledged it. What would fighting accomplish?" Vailora did not have an answer. They left Harmony Prime the next morning aboard a diplomatic vessel called the Meridian. It was a Zethrani ship, crewed by her people, but modified to accommodate human needs. Daniel had been given a section of the ship for his personal use, and Vailora was surprised by what he did with it. He built a garden, using soil and seeds brought from Earth. He created a small green space filled with plants she had never seen before. There were flowers of different colors, vegetables growing in neat rows, and a single tree that he called an apple tree. He spent hours there each day, watering and pruning and talking to the plants as if they could hear him. "Why do you do this?" Vailora asked one afternoon, watching him work. "Because it reminds me of home," he said. And because growing things helps me think. What do you think about? He paused and looked at her with those calm brown eyes. Many things. The future. The past. What kind of galaxy I want to leave behind. It was a strange answer. Too large for such a simple man. Valora filed it away in her mind and continued observing. Over the following weeks, she learned more about her husband. He read constantly. Old books from Earth, written in languages she did not understand. He exercised every morning with a discipline that surprised her. And every night, he spent at least an hour communicating with someone back on Earth through heavily encrypted channels. When she asked about his past, he deflected with humor. When she asked about his family, he changed the subject. When she asked about his military service, he simply said that he had done what was necessary and left it at that. One night, unable to sleep, Valora wandered through the ship and found Daniel sitting alone in the observation deck. The great window showed the endless stars stretching out into infinity. He sat in a chair facing the view, completely still, his face lit by the distant light of 1,000 suns. She almost turned away, not wanting to disturb him, but something made her stop. There was an expression on his face that she had never seen before. Not sadness, not loneliness, but something else entirely. It took her a moment to recognize it. Patience. Cold, calculating patience. The kind of patience that hunters showed when waiting for prey. In that moment, Valora felt a chill run down her spine. She realized that she did not know this man at all. The kind, smile, and gentle manner might be real, or they might be a mask hiding something much darker. She returned to her quarters and sat on her bed for a long time, thinking. The humans were supposed to be a minor species, weak and desperate for acceptance. Daniel was supposed to be an unremarkable man chosen for a symbolic marriage. But symbols did not look at the stars with eyes like that. Valora made a decision. She would watch her husband more carefully. She would learn who he really was, even if she did not like what she found. Because something told her that this marriage was not what it appeared to be. And in the world of galactic politics, appearances were everything until they suddenly were not. 3 months passed aboard the Meridian. Valora and Daniel settled into a routine that was comfortable, if not warm. They ate breakfast together each morning. They attended diplomatic functions as a united front. They spoke politely about small things and avoided the large ones. Valora continued to watch her husband. She noticed patterns in his behavior that most people would miss. He always knew when someone was approaching before they arrived. His eyes moved constantly, tracking exits and potential threats. And sometimes, late at night, she heard him speaking in languages that her translator could not identify. She had just begun to accept that some mysteries might never be solved when the Karathi Empire made its move. It happened without warning. One moment, the Meridian was traveling through neutral space on its way to a trade conference. The next moment, alarms filled the ship as 50 Karathi warships dropped out of faster-than-light travel and surrounded them. Valora rushed to the bridge and found Captain Salorn already trying to hail the hostile fleet. His face was pale with fear. The Karathi ships were massive, each one bristling with weapons that could tear the Meridian apart in seconds. "This is Admiral Drexen of the Karathi Third Fleet," a familiar voice growled through the communication system. "We are here to discuss the human presence in the outer reaches. You will lower your shields and prepare to receive our inspection teams." Captain Salorn looked at Valora desperately. "Princess, we cannot fight them. We have no weapons that could even scratch their armor." "I know," she said quietly. Her mind was already racing through possibilities. She could contact her father. But the Zethrani fleet was days away. She could try to negotiate, but Drexen had made his contempt for humans clear at the wedding. Then Daniel walked onto the bridge. He moved calmly, as if 50 warships were not pointing enough firepower at them to destroy a small moon. He nodded politely to Captain Salorn and stood beside Valora. "Admiral Drexen," Daniel said. "This is unexpected. How can we help you?" Drexen's laugh echoed through the speakers. "You can help by surrendering your territorial claims in the outer reaches. Earth will withdraw from the region immediately. Your mining operations will be transferred to Karathi control, and you, human, will publicly acknowledge that your species is unfit for galactic citizenship. Those are significant demands, Daniel said. His voice remained perfectly calm. They are not demands, they are facts. You have 1 hour to comply, or we will demonstrate what happens to species that overreach their place in the galaxy. The communication cut off. Silence filled the bridge as the crew stared at each other with hopeless eyes. Vylora felt her heart sinking. This was it. The humans would be forced to surrender, and their brief moment in galactic politics would end in humiliation. She turned to Daniel, expecting to see fear or anger or desperation. Instead, she saw nothing but that same calm expression he always wore. "Excuse me for a moment," he said politely. "I need to send a message." He walked to the communication station and began typing. The crew watched him with confusion. What message could possibly help in this situation? Earth had no fleet capable of reaching them in time. The Zethrani could not intervene without starting a war. Daniel typed for less than a minute. The message he sent contained no words. Only a sequence of numbers that meant nothing to anyone watching. Then he stepped back and folded his hands behind his back. "Now we wait," he said. "Wait for what?" Vylora asked. "For my friends to respond." The hour passed slowly. Drexon sent increasingly threatening messages, each one more insulting than the last. Captain Salorn begged Vylora to negotiate. The crew prepared for death, writing final messages to their families and making peace with their gods. Daniel stood at the window and watched the stars. Then, exactly 53 minutes after Daniel sent his message, something happened. Every sensor on the meridian screamed with impossible readings. The Karathi ships began to flicker on their displays, their signals growing weak and unstable. And then they were gone. Not destroyed, not retreating. Simply gone, as if they had never existed. 50 warships, each one the size of a small city, had vanished without a trace. Captain Salorn stared at his instruments with his mouth hanging open. "That is not possible," he whispered. "Ships cannot just disappear." "Apparently they can," Daniel said quietly. 3 hours later, a Karathi escape pod was discovered drifting in the sector. Inside was Admiral Drexon. Alive but broken, he was curled in a ball, his massive body shaking, his voice reduced to a constant whisper. The medical team could not understand what he was saying, but Vylora recognized one phrase that he repeated over and over. "Shadows between the stars. Shadows between the stars." He never recovered. The great Admiral Drexon, terror of a dozen systems, spent the rest of his life in a medical facility. Afraid to close his eyes. Afraid of the dark. Afraid of something that no one else could see. The Karathi Empire demanded answers. So did the Syndicate Lords and the Merchant Guilds, and every other power in the galaxy. What had happened to the Third Fleet? What weapon could destroy 50 warships without leaving any debris? Vylora asked Daniel the same question when they were alone in their quarters. "I called in a favor," he said simply, "from old friends." "What friends have the power to do that?" He did not answer. He just smiled that gentle smile, and returned to his garden. That night, Vylora began her investigation. She used every diplomatic access code she possessed to dig through classified archives and intelligence reports. She searched for any mention of a force capable of what she had witnessed. What she found terrified her. The references were scattered across centuries of galactic history, hidden in footnotes and redacted files. They spoke of a group that operated in the spaces between empires, a force that could not be seen or tracked or stopped. They had toppled the Morvathi dynasty 200 years ago. They had ended the Syndicate Wars without firing a single public shot. They had assassinated tyrants and freed slaves and reshaped the galaxy in ways that most people never noticed. Different cultures had different names for them. The Karathi called them the Void Walkers. The Syndicate called them the Invisible Hand. But the most common name, whispered in fear by those who knew, was the Quiet Ones. The last confirmed sighting had been 2 centuries ago. Most believed they were extinct or had never existed at all. They were ghost stories, warnings told to children and paranoid dictators. But Valora had seen what they could do. She had watched 50 warships vanish like smoke in the wind. And she had noticed something in the old files. Something that everyone else had missed. The Quiet Ones were never described in detail. Their species was never identified. Their technology was never explained. They were simply shadows, powerful and mysterious and terrifying. But one file, buried deep in Morvathi archives, contained a single line that made Vylora's blood run cold. The Quiet Ones do not age. They do not tire. They come from a world of water and green things, a small planet in an unremarkable system. A world of water and green things. A small planet. Earth. Valora closed the file and sat in the darkness of her quarters for a long time. Her husband was sleeping in the next room. The kind and gentle man who grew plants and read old books and never raised his voice. The same man who could apparently summon forces capable of destroying entire fleets. She did not sleep that night. She was too busy wondering who she had really married. Vylora spent 2 weeks gathering evidence. She barely slept. She barely ate. Every moment that Daniel was not watching, she was digging through archives, connecting pieces of a puzzle that no one else had ever assembled. The pattern was clear once she knew what to look for. Every major shift in galactic power over the last 3 centuries had human fingerprints on it. The fall of empires, the rise of alliances, the mysterious deaths of tyrants who seemed untouchable. All of it traced back to small interventions, tiny pushes that sent ripples across the galaxy, and Earth had supposedly only discovered faster than light travel 50 years ago. The dates did not match. The history did not make sense. Unless everything the galaxy believed about humans was a lie. On the 15th night, Valora could not wait any longer. She found Daniel in the garden, kneeling beside his apple tree, carefully removing dead leaves from its branches. The ship was quiet around them. The crew was asleep. It was the perfect moment for truth. "I know what you are," Valora said. Daniel did not look up from his work. "And what am I?" "You are one of them, the Quiet Ones. You have been manipulating the galaxy for centuries, while pretending to be a primitive species." He was silent for a long moment. Then he set down his gardening tools and stood to face her. The gentle smile was gone. In its place was something older, something tired, something that had seen too much suffering to be surprised by anything. "How much did you find?" he asked. "Enough. I found the Morvathi archives. I found the connection to Earth. I found records of interventions going back 300 years. Her voice shook with anger and fear. "You married me to put a human at the center of Zethrani politics. I was supposed to be your puppet, dancing on strings I could not see." Daniel nodded slowly. "You are partly correct. Then tell me the rest. Tell me everything. I deserve to know who I married." He walked to a bench at the edge of the garden and sat down heavily. For the first time since she had known him, he looked old. The weight on his shoulders became visible, the burden of secrets that had been carried for too long. "Humanity discovered faster than light travel 400 years ago," he began. "We were so excited. We thought we would find friends among the stars, allies who would welcome us into a community of intelligent beings." He paused, his eyes distant with memory. "We found slavers instead. The Morvathi captured our first colony ships and sold our people to the highest bidders. The Syndicate lords used us for medical experiments. The Korathi hunted us for sport, betting on how long humans could survive in their arena games. We were considered animals, toys, resources to be used and discarded." Valora felt her stomach turn. She had heard rumors of such things in ancient history, but she had never connected them to humans. "For 100 years, humanity suffered," Daniel continued. "We were scattered across the galaxy, owned by different masters, forbidden from gathering or organizing. They tried to break us. They almost succeeded. But they did not," Valora said quietly. "No. They did not understand what humans are. We survive. We adapt. We remember." His voice hardened. "And we plan. Even in chains, even separated by light years, we found ways to communicate. We built a network of operatives, slaves, who passed messages through whispers and hidden symbols. We called ourselves the Foundation, because we were building something that would last. He stood and walked to the observation window. The stars shone cold and distant beyond the glass. It took us 200 years to free ourselves, not through war, because we could not win a war, through patience, through manipulation, through becoming so useful to our masters that they never noticed we were also becoming dangerous. He turned to face her. The Morvathi dynasty did not fall because of politics or economics. It fell because we made it fall. Every succession crisis, every assassination, every rebellion was guided by human hands. Valora's mind raced with the implications. The Syndicate Wars, the Korathi civil conflict, the collapse of the Merchant Guild monopoly. All of it, Daniel confirmed. We have spent 3 centuries reshaping the galaxy, removing threats, creating opportunities, ensuring that humanity will never be enslaved again. The species who hurt us have paid for their crimes, even if they do not know it. And the marriage? Me? Daniel's expression softened with something that might have been regret. The Zethrani Empire is one of the few powers that never participated in human slavery. Your people were always fair, always honorable. We wanted an alliance with you, a real alliance, not built on deception, but you deceived me anyway. I did. The marriage was my idea. I wanted to place myself at the heart of Zethrani politics, to protect the alliance from those who would destroy it. He stepped closer to her. But I did not expect what happened next. What happened next? I grew to care for you. The words seemed to surprise even him. I have spent my entire life serving the Foundation. I have done terrible things for the sake of humanity. I never allowed myself attachments, never let anyone close. But you. He shook his head. You are brave and intelligent and kind. You challenge me. You make me want to be better than I am. Vylora did not know what to say. Her anger was still there, burning hot in her chest, but underneath it was something else, a recognition that Daniel had just given her power over him. He had revealed his greatest secret and his greatest weakness in the same breath. I am offering you a choice, Daniel said. You can expose everything. You can tell the galaxy what humans really are. It will cause chaos. Wars will break out. Millions will die. But the truth will be known. Or you can stand beside me, help me build something better. The Foundation does not want to rule the galaxy. We want to protect it, to guide it toward a future where species like humanity can exist without fear. We have been working in shadows for too long. Perhaps it is time for partners. Indeed also there, Vylora stared at him. This man, this impossible man, was offering her a role in a conspiracy that spanned centuries. He was trusting her with information that could destroy everything he had built. Why would you give me this choice? She asked. Why not just kill me? Or manipulate me into silence? Because I am tired of manipulation, Daniel said simply. And because I think you deserve better than lies. Vylora turned away from him and walked to the observation window. The stars stretched out before her. Countless points of light representing civilizations and empires and histories she was only beginning to understand. Her husband was a monster, or a hero, or both at the same time. She thought about her duty to her people, her loyalty to her father, her belief in the principles she had been raised with. She thought about the Korathi and the Syndicate and all the others who had tortured humans for sport. She thought about Daniel kneeling in his garden, caring for plants from a world he could never safely return to. I need time, she said finally. Take all the time you need. Vylora did not go to bed that night. She sat in the observation deck until the artificial dawn, watching the stars and wondering what kind of galaxy she wanted to live in. Vylora made her decision 3 days later. She found Daniel in the communication room, sending another encrypted message to Earth. I will stand with you, she said. Daniel turned to look at her. His face showed nothing, but his eyes softened with relief. Are you certain? Once you choose this path, there is no going back. I have thought about it carefully. The galaxy is broken. The strong prey on the weak. Empires rise and fall. But the suffering continues. She stepped closer to him. If you truly want to build something better, then I want to help, but I will not be your puppet. I will be your partner, or I will be nothing. Partners, Daniel agreed. He extended his hand, and she took it. For one brief moment, Violora felt hope. She believed that they could make a difference together, that the future might be brighter than the past. Then everything fell apart. The news broke 3 weeks later. Someone within Zethrani intelligence had pieced together fragments of truth and shared them with other empires. Perhaps they had intercepted communications, perhaps they had bribed the right people, perhaps they had simply guessed correctly. The source did not matter. What mattered was the result. The galaxy erupted in panic. The Korathi accused humans of destroying their third fleet through forbidden weapons. The Syndicate lords demanded immediate sanctions against Earth. The merchant guilds suspended all trade with human systems. Even species that had been friendly toward humanity suddenly grew cold and suspicious. Valora's own father summoned her home to face judgment. The message was clear and formal, using language reserved for criminals and traitors. Emperor Mathurin believed that his daughter had knowingly aided human deception. She was to return immediately to stand trial. You should go, Daniel said when he read the message. Distance yourself from me. Declare the marriage void. Your people will understand that you were deceived. And leave you to face this alone? I have faced worse. Valora shook her head. No. If we are partners, then we face this together. Running away now would only confirm their fears. They traveled to Grand Tribunal Station, where representatives of every major power had gathered to decide humanity's fate. The station was massive, an artificial world floating in neutral space, designed specifically for moments of galactic crisis. Armed ships from a dozen different empires surrounded it, all of them pointing weapons at each other and at the small human vessel that docked at the central port. The tribunal chamber was enormous. Thousands of delegates filled the curved seats that rose toward the ceiling. At the center stood a raised platform where the accused would stand. Valora and Daniel walked to that platform together, surrounded by armed guards, watched by billions through broadcast feeds. Emperor Mathurin sat in the Zethrani section, his face hard as stone. He did not look at his daughter. The chief arbiter, an ancient being from a species so old that no one remembered their original name, called the tribunal to order. Daniel Cole of Earth, you stand accused of conspiracy against the Galactic Council. You are accused of commanding secret military forces that have committed acts of terrorism against sovereign nations. You are accused of marrying a member of Zethrani royalty under false pretenses. How do you answer? Daniel stood calmly, his hands clasped behind his back. The accusations are partially true. The chamber exploded with noise. Delegates shouted accusations and demands. Guards raised their weapons. The chief arbiter had to call for silence repeatedly before order was restored. You admit your guilt? The arbiter asked. I admit that humanity has operated in secret for centuries. I admit that we have intervened in galactic affairs. But I do not admit guilt, because I reject the premise that we have done wrong. You reject the premise? A Korathi delegate stood, his armor bristling with anger. Your people destroyed 50 of our warships. You murdered thousands of our warriors. Your warriors who were threatening to destroy a diplomatic vessel and force humanity into submission, Daniel replied. They were the aggressors. We defended ourselves. With weapons that should not exist. With forces that no one knew about. You have been lying to the galaxy since we first met you. Valora stepped forward. She had not planned to speak, but she could not stay silent any longer. May I address the tribunal? The chief arbiter nodded. Valora turned to face the thousands of delegates, the cameras, the galaxy watching her. Her voice was steady and clear. You accuse humans of deception. You accuse them of building power in secret. You ask why they did not trust the galaxy with the truth. She paused, letting her words settle. I ask you to consider why they felt the need to hide. She pointed at the Korathi section. Your ancestors enslaved humans and sold them as property. She pointed at the Syndicate lords. Yours used them for medical experiments, testing drugs and diseases on living people. She swept her arm across the entire chamber. Almost every major power in this room participated in the torture and murder of humans when they first reached the stars. The chamber fell silent. Humanity learned that weakness means death. They learned that trust leads to chains. They built their power in shadows because the light was full of predators. Vylora's voice rose with passion. And now you are angry that they succeeded? Now you demand they make themselves vulnerable again? They are a threat, a syndicate lord called out. Any species with that much hidden power is dangerous. Then you should be grateful they are merciful, Vylora replied. They could have destroyed you at any time. They chose not to. They could have conquered the galaxy. They chose not to. All they want is to live in peace, free from the fear of slavery. The debate continued for hours. Accusations flew back and forth. Old grievances were raised and rejected. The galaxy's powers argued about justice and security and the balance of power. Finally, the Korathi delegate rose again. Enough words. We demand proof of human submission. They will surrender their secret weapons. They will disband their hidden forces. Or we will consider this an act of war. Daniel stepped forward. He raised one hand. Every light on the station flickered. Every weapon system showed errors. Every ship in orbit reported catastrophic failures in their targeting computers. The delegates stared at their devices with horror as they realized that nothing was working. This is not a weapon, Daniel said calmly. This is a demonstration. Humanity does not want war. We want peace, real peace, built on mutual respect instead of fear. He lowered his hand. The systems return to normal, but if you force us to fight, we will fight. And you will lose. Not because we are stronger or more numerous, but because we have been preparing for this moment for 300 years. He paused, letting the silence stretch. We are offering friendship. We are offering partnership. We are offering to help build a galaxy where no species is enslaved, where the strong protect the weak instead of devouring them. He looked at the Korathi delegate. Or you can choose war, and discover exactly why every empire in the galaxy has learned to fear the quiet ones. The vote was called the next morning. It was not unanimous. It was not even close. But enough powers voted for negotiation instead of war that the immediate crisis passed. Daniel and Vylora returned to the Meridian that night. They did not speak until they were alone in their quarters, away from cameras and guards and the weight of galactic politics. That was dangerous, Vylora said. You showed them too much. I showed them exactly enough, Daniel replied. Fear is a tool, but it must be used carefully. Too little, and they attack. Too much, and they panic. He sat down heavily. Now we negotiate. Now we build. Vylora sat beside him. And if they refuse? Daniel looked at her with eyes that had seen centuries of struggle. Then we try again, and again, until they understand. The negotiations lasted for 8 months. There were moments when everything nearly collapsed. When old hatreds threatened to destroy the fragile progress that had been made. But Daniel and Vylora worked tirelessly, meeting with delegates, addressing concerns, slowly building trust where none had existed before. The Korathi were the hardest to convince. They had lost face when their fleet vanished, and their warrior culture demanded satisfaction. But Daniel offered them something unexpected. He gave them access to records of what the old Korathi Empire had done to humans, the arena games, and hunting parties, and casual cruelties. When the current generation saw the evidence of their ancestors' crimes, many of them felt shame for the first time. We are not asking for revenge, Daniel told their Council of Blades. We are asking for acknowledgement. Recognize what happened. Promise it will never happen again, and we can move forward as equals. The syndicate lords were easier. They cared about profit more than pride. When they realized that cooperation with humanity would open new markets and new opportunities, they became enthusiastic supporters of the peace process. The hardest conversation Vylora had was with her father. Emperor Matheron agreed to meet her privately, without guards or advisors, in the garden of the imperial palace. It was the same garden where Vylora had played as a child, where she had learned to walk among the purple flowers that grew only on her homeworld. "You shamed me before the entire galaxy," her father said. His voice was cold, but Vylora could see the pain beneath it. "You took the side of aliens against your own people." "I took the side of truth," Vylora replied. "The Zethrani have always valued honor and justice. How could we claim those values while condemning a species for defending themselves against centuries of abuse? They deceived us. They manipulated us. They survived. The galaxy tried to destroy them, and they survived. Is that not worthy of respect?" Mattheron was silent for a long moment. He walked to a bench and sat down, suddenly looking older than Vylora had ever seen him. "Your mother would have understood," he said quietly. "She always said that true strength comes from compassion, not cruelty. I have tried to remember that, but it is not always easy." Vylora sat beside him. "The humans do not want to be our enemies. They want to be our friends. Real friends, not allies of convenience. Daniel speaks often of building something that will last beyond any single lifetime. And you trust him? This man who lied to you from the beginning? I trust his vision. I trust his commitment. And I trust that he loves me, in whatever way a man who has carried such burdens for so long can love." She took her father's hand. "I am not asking you to forgive him. I am asking you to give him a chance to prove himself." Mattheran squeezed her hand. "You have grown into a remarkable woman. Your mother would be proud. Does that mean you will support the treaty?" Her father smiled, a rare expression that reminded Vylora of happier times. "I will consider it." 3 weeks later, the Zethrani Empire officially endorsed the new Galactic Agreement. The treaty that was finally signed changed everything. Humanity was granted a permanent seat on the Galactic Council. The Foundation did not dissolve, but it began operating more openly, coordinating with other powers instead of manipulating them from the shadows. A new organization was created, called the Watchers, dedicated to preventing the kind of atrocities that had marked humanity's first contact with the galaxy. Daniel stepped down as director of the Foundation. He said that he had been fighting for too long, that it was time for younger people to carry the burden. But Vylora suspected the truth was simpler. He wanted to rest. He wanted to spend his remaining years in peace, tending his garden and watching the stars. They returned to the Meridian, which had been refitted with a joint crew of humans and Zethrani. The ship was now a symbol of the Alliance, traveling between systems to strengthen bonds and resolve disputes before they could become conflicts. One evening, almost a year after the tribunal, Vylora found Daniel in his garden. The apple tree had grown taller, its branches now heavy with fruit. He was sitting beneath it, reading an old book from Earth, looking more relaxed than she had ever seen him. "What are you reading?" she asked. "Poetry. A human named Frost wrote it, centuries ago. He said that nothing gold can stay." Daniel closed the book. "I used to believe that. I used to think that everything beautiful was temporary, that the universe tended toward darkness. And now?" He looked up at her with those warm brown eyes, the eyes that had once seemed so ordinary and now seemed like windows into a soul deeper than any she had known. "Now I think he was wrong. Gold can stay, if you fight for it, if you build something worth protecting." He stood and took her hands in his. "You taught me that." Vylora smiled. "I think you taught yourself. I just helped you remember." They walked together to the observation deck, where the great window showed a binary sunset over a planet they were visiting. 2 suns, one gold and one red, sinking below the horizon of a world that had never known war. "Do you have any regrets?" Vylora asked. Daniel thought for a long moment. "I regret the lives I took. I regret the lies I told. I regret the years I spent in shadows, never knowing warmth or trust." He turned to face her. "But I do not regret the path that led me to you. In a galaxy that tried so hard to destroy my people, I found something worth protecting." Vylora leaned against his shoulder. "You know the galaxy is still watching us. They are still afraid of what humans might do. Let them watch. Let them be afraid." Daniel wrapped his arm around her. "Fear can be healthy, if it leads to caution instead of violence. And in time, perhaps fear will become respect, and respect will become friendship. You sound like an optimist. I sound like someone who has finally found hope. They stood together in silence, watching the twin suns disappear below the horizon. The stars emerged slowly. Thousands of points of light, representing civilizations and histories and futures not yet written. Valora had married a human for peace, expecting nothing more than a quiet life of diplomatic ceremony. She had discovered that her husband was the most dangerous man in the galaxy, the leader of a shadow empire that had shaped history for centuries. But she had also discovered something else. Beneath the secrets and the power, beneath the weight of responsibility that he carried, Daniel was simply a man who wanted to protect his people. He was tired and scarred and haunted by the things he had done, but he was also kind and patient and capable of love. The galaxy would remember this moment as the beginning of a new era. Historians would write about the treaty and the politics and the balance of power. They would analyze the implications and debate the consequences. But Valora would remember it differently. She would remember standing beside her husband, watching the stars, knowing that they had built something together that would outlast them both. Humanity had spent 300 years hiding in the shadows, surviving through deception and fear. Now they stood in the light, no longer victims, no longer secrets, but partners in a galaxy that was slowly learning to be better. And if anyone threatened that fragile peace, if anyone tried to return to the old ways of cruelty and domination, they would discover exactly why every empire in the galaxy had learned to fear the quiet ones. Because humans protected what they loved, and they had finally found something worth loving.